clear day. Rise and look around.
And then one question I did have that's nothing to do with the topic you chose for today is the industry specific T group concept that I've been hearing from Chris for like since 2016 we met. So I'd love to hear more about why it's called industry specific T group. What's different? And so that's something I wanted to understand.
Oh, yes. Well, the original T group was started by Kurt Levine, in what was Connecticut. Gil, had your picture taken in front of the building recently. It's in Connecticut, where they were working on fair employment, as the legislature passed something on fair employment, but it wasn't being done, So Kurt Levine, or Kurt Lewin, was hired, and he was working with them, but he discovered that when the groups went back to their community, in other words, groups that come from the communities, let's call them cousins from the community. Maybe you had somebody from the mayor's office, somebody from a social service, somebody they didn't really work together, except they were on this project together. They didn't have the same boss, for instance. So they came to this training, and what Kurt Levine discovered was that when they went back home, nothing happened. And so it was his belief that the reason was because they didn't have an identity. Dick Schmuck named it a cousin group, another amazing man, Dick Schmuck, but cousin group. That is of people who work on the same thing, but they don't have the same boss. And so Kurt Levine set up the T group with the cousin group. You had to be working on the same issue. And the T group, remember, was a training in basic skills. It was called Basic Skills Training. It was about group process, sensitivity to group processes. Who's talking to whom? Who's in charge? Who's listening to whom? I mean, it's about group process. It was not therapy. The T group is not therapy, except it became that, which nearly destroyed it in a lot of places because psychologists took over who didn't know anything about group process. And they turned it into therapy groups, which would not work in any business. Now, what we've done is we've gone back to, and if you want to read this more carefully, it's in the early chapter of my memoirs, maybe chapter 2 or something. It's very early. I talk about this. We go back and we said, let's do the same thing. The T group was originally meant not for strangers to come to, but for a cousin group, or better yet, the boss and employee. Well, now a lot of people said, you can't do that. And the reason they said you can't do that is because it had turned into therapy groups. Of course, you can't do therapy with a boss and employees, but you can do what we do, which is to train people in basic skills, be able to describe a feeling rather than just express it, be able to describe behavior specifically. I liked it when you did that, or I had trouble when you did that or said that, not just you're a great guy or a great woman or whatever. Paraphrasing, tuning into the other to make sure I get the meaning of the words and make sure I even got the words, for heaven's sakes. And the other skill was called perception check. So we turned the T group, we went, as far as I'm concerned, we went back to the original. That is, you work with the intact group or cousin group, that's the case. So in organizations, we would work through the whole organization from top to bottom. I mean, this would mean like an organization of 2,000 people. But we work with each unit, boss and employee, in a T group. But as we talk about it in chapter 10 of my memoirs, I think you all have my memoirs. I spell it out there a lot. Chris has spelled it out in a couple of his books on activities. But if you want to know what we do what I've written about there in, I think it's chapter 10. Anyway, the point being that we don't want it to be therapy. That's why we could have a boss and an employee in the same group. We could have, for instance, this Pico Energy, when I started doing what they call conflict management, and we always encourage them to call it what they want to call it. They didn't call it T group, but it doesn't matter. Just like lean manufacturing, you don't want to use the name. You want to do the work, the process work. But if you say lean manufacturing, some people will immediately be against it. Or if you say T group, people will be against it or for it. No, but we did this work. And with David Hellwig, who was a very strong vice president at Pico Energy, and he had an engineering background, but he sponsored these groups because he asked me, how can we be helped deal with conflict? I said, I know a way. So we did this. Well, in the first T group that he was in, we stop at a certain point and have people pair with a partner who's been watching them. Guess what? I had an hourly worker watching David Hellwig, the VP. They established a relationship where the hourly worker could give, and we listened, man. Positive feedback. I mean, specific feedback. It didn't have to be positive. Specific feedback to the person. So David Hellwig was hearing specific feedback from an hourly worker, and then later giving it to him. And it's just transformational in terms of what happens. Also, if you have a stranger group like T groups became, you want to focus on the here and now, and not the there and then, because somebody brings a story from, Italy to the thing. You don't know their story, and it's not relevant. But in a T group, the way we do it, or skill group, or whatever you want to call it, the here and now becomes what the group's facing. They come to their meeting, I'll call it T group meeting, with their boss and things. And today they had a real problem in the morning. Someone says, I was really pissed off about this. And then they're dealing with it right in the group, talking about their anger, or their appreciation, or whatever. And it's not really there and then. And then they're solving problems. And there's a lot more to be said about that. But Gil and Chris have become experts in this. And so it's so amazing to me to have them being the future here of LEOS. It's getting late and I have a couple other things I want to say, but who else haven't we heard from, Chris?
Before the next, I just want to say that the purpose of LEOS is to carry this to other generations.
That's right. We want others to learn, you and others to learn how to do this, so that this work deserves to live on. It deserves to live on. How about David or Carol? Or Michelle? Hey, I think.
Just a
I think
minute,
I
I'm sorry.
interrupted somebody.
Just a minute, I want to check. Did I respond to Yoshiko? To your comment? Was it?
Yes, that was very
okay.
helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good. Okay.